The first time I heard my wife introduce herself with a different last name. I wasn't standing in a courtroom or reading some dramatic confession. I was in the pickup line at my daughter's middle school, windows down, trying to look like a normal dad who definitely hadn't slept 3 hours in 2 days. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered because that's what you do when you have kids and a mortgage and a life that depends on getting calls you don't recognize. A man's voice said, "Hey, this is Cal. I'm looking for Leah Hart. Hart. Not Mercer. Not my last name. Not her maiden name, either. Just Hart." I stared at the dashboard like it had the answer printed on it. I said, "You have the wrong number." There was a pause, like he was scrolling through his own reality. "No," he said. "This is the number she gave me. She said her husband is complicated, so I shouldn't call at certain times." Behind me, someone honked. In front of me, my daughter's teacher waved like she knew me, like I was still a person whose life made sense. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't even ask the obvious question yet. I just said, "Cal, how do you know my wife?" He sighed like I was the one ruining his day. "Look, man," he said, "I'm not trying to fight. She told me she's basically separated. She said you guys are just co-parenting under the same roof until things finalize." That was new, and it was news to me. I hung up before my hands started shaking enough to scare my daughter when she got in the car. Because whatever was happening, I wasn't going to turn Mia's Wednesday into a memory she'd drag around for the rest of her life. I picked her up. I smiled. I asked about science class. I complimented her braid. I did the dad thing. Then I drove home like I was delivering myself to a crime scene. "My name is Graham Mercer. I'm 45 years old. I work in commercial risk and compliance for a shipping company that moves freight up and down the West Coast. It's not glamorous. It's mostly spreadsheets, audits, incident reports, and the kind of quiet problem-solving where you're the guy people call when they want facts, not feelings." My wife at the time was Lee Mercer, 40, communications director for a hospital foundation. Smart, polished, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they were being slightly graded. We had 2 kids. Noah was 16. Driver's permit, sarcasm, and a face that could somehow look 14 and 40 at the same time depending on the day. Mia was 12, old enough to notice everything, young enough to still believe the adults were in charge. We lived together, same house, same neighborhood, same routines, or at least I thought we did. For most of our marriage, Lee and I worked like a well-built bridge. Not romantic in the movie sense. Practical, strong. We didn't fall apart when life got heavy. We carried it. We met in our late 20s at a charity 5K that neither of us wanted to run. I was there because my buddy guilted me into supporting the cause. Lee was there because she'd already committed to being the kind of person who supports the cause. She caught me trying to stretch with the seriousness of a man negotiating with his hamstrings. She laughed. I laughed. We ran. We talked the whole way, and still somehow finished ahead of the guy in the foam banana costume. She was sharp. I liked that. I'd spent too much of my 20s around people who treated life like a vague suggestion. We built a marriage the way adults do. Work, kids, mortgage, little vacations that were mostly just relocating stress to a different zip code. And then, somewhere around last year, Lee started treating our life like a brand she was no longer proud of. It wasn't one big event. It was a series of small edits. She stopped saying we and started saying I. She stopped asking and started informing. She'd come home from networking dinners with that glazed look people get when they've been in a room full of mirrors all night. She began using therapy language like it was a weapon she'd learned to sharpen. If I disagreed with her, I wasn't disagreeing. I was invalidating. If I asked a question, I wasn't asking. I was interrogating. If I wanted to talk about money, I wasn't being responsible. I was controlling. At first, I tried to meet her where she was. I read articles she sent. I watched a couple of podcasts she liked. I agreed to a therapist. I did the work because I wasn't married to the idea of being right. I was married to the idea of keeping my family intact. But the more I tried, the more the rules changed. The best way I can explain it is this. Our marriage started feeling like a job where Lee was the manager, her friends were HR, and I was always one mistake away from a performance improvement plan. And Lee did have friends who fed that dynamic like it was their hobby. There was Tori, who ran a Pilates studio and posted motivational quotes like she was paid per exclamation point. There was Marisol, who worked in corporate HR and genuinely believed every conflict could be solved by documenting it. And there was Kendra, a somatic coach, which I learned is a real thing and not just a phrase invented to sell candles. They were always around, always checking on Lee, always nodding like they were witnessing something brave and historic. And I'll say this, because I'm not here to pretend I was a perfect husband. I worked a lot, not because I loved work more than my family, because I loved my family enough to keep the lights on without gambling our future. Lee, meanwhile, started acting like my steadiness was the problem, like my calm was a refusal to grow, like my boundaries were cruelty. I noticed the shift before I had proof of anything. I noticed because the house got quieter, but not peaceful. Quiet like a room where someone just hid something under the couch. And then the small stuff started turning into measurable stuff. A charge on our credit card for a parking space across town, when Lee's office was already an office. A new toll route showing up on our account. Bridges and exits Lee had no reason to take. A return shipping label in the trash, ripped in half, with a name I didn't recognize. And one night, I saw something that flipped a switch in my brain. Lee fell asleep on the couch with her phone face down on her chest. I didn't go snooping. I didn't pick it up. I'm not built that way. But her smartwatch was on the coffee table, vibrating like it was nervous. A notification flashed on the screen. Cal, can't wait to see you Friday. Miss you, Hart again. My stomach did that slow drop you feel when you step off a curb you thought was there. I stood there in my own living room, watching my wife breathe. And I realized I was sharing a house with someone who was living a second life right under my roof. Here's the part people always expect next. They expect me to explode. They expect a fight. They expect me to wake her up and demand answers like it's a movie and yelling is a form of truth. But my job trained me out of that. If you want the whole story, you don't scare the evidence into hiding. So I did something quieter. I paid attention. I started tracking the facts of my own life, like I was auditing a company that might be stealing from me. Not obsessively, methodically. I checked our shared accounts and noticed small transfers leaving in neat little increments, always under the amount that would make most people pause. I checked our phone plan and saw a second line added 3 months ago listed as tablet. We didn't own a new tablet. I checked our mail, and that's when I saw it. USPS Informed Delivery sent a preview of an envelope coming that day. The return address said, Riverside Flats Property Management. Lee brought the mail in before I got home. The envelope never made it to the counter, but the image was burned into my brain. So the next day, I came home early and waited. Not like a spy, like a man who had finally realized he was the only one in his marriage not allowed to know the rules. Lee arrived, cheerful in a way that felt practiced. She kissed Mia's head, asked Noah about homework like she was auditioning for Normal Mom. Then she went straight to the kitchen drawer where we keep scissors and coupons and all the things adults pretend they'll organize someday. She pulled out an envelope, Riverside Flats, and slid it into her purse without opening it. I watched from the hallway. She didn't know I was there. And that moment did something important. It made it undeniable. Lee wasn't confused. Lee wasn't finding herself. Lee was hiding. So I called an attorney, not as a threat, as a seatbelt. My attorney's name was Elliot Park. Late 40s, clean suit, calm eyes, the kind of guy who speaks like he's used to people crying in his office, and he's learned not to flinch. He didn't ask me if I still loved her. He asked me what I could prove. So I started proving. I ran a credit report and found a new credit card opened in Lee's name with a mailing address that wasn't ours. I used the toll history to confirm consistent trips to the same neighborhood across town. I checked our bank activity and found payments to a storage facility, also across town, also consistent. And then, because life apparently loves irony, Noah gave me the next piece without even meaning to. He came into my home office one evening, holding his phone like it was heavy. He said, "Dad, can I ask you something without you getting weird?" Noah and I had always been close. Not best friends, father and son, the kind of closeness that comes from reliability. He knew I wouldn't explode. So I said, "Try me." He sat down, hesitated, then said, "Mom keeps asking me to take pictures of stuff." "What stuff?" He swallowed. "Like your truck, where you park, what time you get home, if you're in a bad mood." I didn't react. I let him finish. "She calls it documentation. She says it's to protect us. She said you might try something when you get stressed." That sentence landed in my chest like a cold coin. "Has she said that to Mia?" Noah looked down. "She told Mia you're not safe when you feel disrespected." Mia doesn't know what that means, but she knows it sounds scary. I nodded once. Slowly, Noah unlocked his phone and slid it toward me. He'd screenshotted messages. Lee telling him to keep notes. Lee telling him to be discreet. Lee telling him, "You're helping me build a safe exit plan." Exit plan. While living in my house, while I was making Mia lunch, and reminding Noah about his driving hours. I stared at the messages and felt something in me shift from hurt to resolve. Because cheating is betrayal, but using your kids as tools, that's a different category. That's not an accident. That's a strategy. I handed the phone back and said, "You did the right thing telling me." Noah's jaw tightened. I felt gross doing it, like I was spying. I stopped, but she kept asking. Good, I said. You're not in the middle of this? He let out a breath. Are you and Mom, are you getting divorced? I didn't sugarcoat it. I'm talking to someone, I said. I'm figuring out how to protect you and Mia. That's my job. He nodded once, like he'd been waiting for an adult to finally act like one. Then he said quietly, I heard her on the phone last week. She said the goal is to make you look unstable so she gets the house. There it was. Not confusion, not self-discovery. A plan, so Elliot Park and I got to work. We didn't do anything dramatic. We did legal. He helped me file for divorce and prepare temporary orders. Custody, finances, residency, all the things people don't think about until they're living them. He told me not to confront Lee without a plan. He told me to keep my emotions off the record. And he told me something that stuck with me. Graham, he said, people like your wife don't fear anger. They know how to use it. What they fear is calm documentation. I didn't want a war, but I wasn't going to lose my kids, because Lee decided to turn my life into content for her second identity. And that brings me to the night she tried to corner me. It was a Sunday, rainy gray, classic Pacific Northwest mood lighting. I came home from the grocery store with Mia's preferred cereal. Because yes, she can taste the difference, and yes, it matters in our house. The living room was staged like a workshop. Candles, a whiteboard, a pitcher of lemon water, a stack of printed papers on a clipboard. Lee sat on the couch like she was hosting. Tori was there, perched like she owned the place. Marisol had a laptop open, because of course she did. Kendra was cross-legged on the rug, eyes half closed, like she could sense my energy and was already disappointed in it. Lee smiled at me like she was being generous. Perfect, she said. You're home. We're going to do something really healthy tonight. I set the groceries down slowly. What is this? It's a guided alignment conversation, Lee said. We're creating a shared agreement so we stop cycling. Marisol nodded like she just diagnosed me. Tori smiled like she was about to watch a reality show. Lee slid the clipboard toward me. On top was a document titled, Co-Parenting Household Protocol Draft, as if my marriage had become a policy memo. There were signature lines at the bottom, not just for Lee and me. For witnesses. I looked at the witness lines and then at her friends. You're serious, I said. Lee's expression tightened. Yes, and before you get defensive, this is about safety and respect. Kendra added, and accountability, Tori said. It's kind of empowering, honestly. I flipped through the pages. Rules about my tone. Rules about when I could discuss finances. Rules about how I had to request time alone with my own children. And a section that made my stomach go cold. It described Graham's history of emotional volatility and patterns of coercive behavior. History. Patterns. This wasn't an agreement. It was a narrative. A narrative designed to be signed. A narrative designed to become evidence. Lee watched my face like she was waiting for me to break character. Just read it, she said. If you sign, we can move forward without conflict. And there it was again, her new favorite concept. Moving forward, always forward, never accountable backward. I set the clipboard down gently. I'm not signing this, I said. Lee's smile vanished. Then you're choosing chaos. Marisol leaned forward. Refusal is information. Tori laughed quietly. Wow, and Kendra said, softly like she was narrating a documentary, this is the pattern. I looked at all three of them and felt the strangest thing. Not rage, not panic, just clarity, because I finally understood what they thought I was. A man who cared too much about being seen as good to ever defend himself. A man who'd rather swallow humiliation than risk being called the bad guy. They expected me to fold, because folding kept the room comfortable. I stood up. I need 10 minutes, I said. Lee's eyes narrowed. For what? To get something, I said. I walked to my office, closed the door, and pulled a thin folder from my desk drawer. It wasn't dramatic. No manila envelope. No hidden compartment. Just paperwork prepared by a lawyer who'd seen this movie before. I walked back into the living room and set it on the coffee table. Lee stared at it, then at me. What's that? Divorce petition, I said. Temporary orders request, financial disclosures, and a notice to preserve communications. Tori's mouth opened like she'd forgotten how. Marisol blinked fast, like her brain was buffering. Kendra sat up straighter, suddenly less spiritual. Lee didn't reach for the folder right away. Her voice went thin. You're bluffing, I shook my head. Filed tomorrow morning. These are courtesy copies. Marisol recovered first. HR always recovers first. You can't just do this without talking through it. I did talk, I said. For months, you all just didn't like the answer. Lee grabbed the top page and scanned it, eyes darting. Her face shifted, confident to confused to scared. Not because she loved me, because her script had changed. Graham, she said, you're being impulsive. I gave a small, tired laugh. Lee, you staged a witness signing with a whiteboard and lemon water. If anyone here is impulsive, it's not me, Tori muttered. This is insane. I looked at her. It's insane that you came to watch. That shut her up. Lee tried a different tactic. The one she used when the first didn't work. Soft voice, victim posture. Think about the kids, she said. I replied. That's why I'm doing this now instead of waiting until you finish building your documentation about me. Her eyes flashed. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't argue. I didn't present evidence like a magician, revealing a trick. I just said, your attorney will talk to my attorney. Then I looked at her friends. You can go, I said, calm as a checkout clerk. Workshop S over. Marisol stood offended. We're here to support Lee. I know, I said. That's the problem. They left in a cluster of nervous energy and forced outrage. Lee stayed on the couch, holding the papers like they were radioactive. Mia peeked from the hallway, confused. Noah appeared behind her, eyes steady, like he already understood what was happening. I walked to Mia and lowered my voice. Hey, I said gently, go upstairs. Put your headphones on. Watch your show. I'll come talk to you after. She nodded, but she didn't move right away. Are you and Mom mad? She asked. I knelt down. Grown-up stuff, I said. You didn't do anything wrong. She searched my face, then nodded and went upstairs. Noah lingered. Lee looked at him, then at me, and something in her expression hardened. You've turned them against me, she said. Noah spoke before I could. Mom, he said, voice flat, you turned me into your assistant. Lee froze, and I watched her realize in real time that her double life wasn't just hidden from me. It was cracking in front of our children. That night, Lee didn't sleep in our bed. She claimed she needed space. She took a pillow and went to the guest room like she was the one choosing. I didn't correct her. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe. And in that quiet, I felt grief. Because no matter what someone does, the death of a marriage is still the death of something you built. But underneath the grief was something sturdier. Self-respect. The next morning, Elliot filed. Lee's phone started buzzing like it had a pulse. By noon, she'd called me 17 times. Not exaggerating. I checked. At call number 8, she left a voicemail. It wasn't pleading. It was furious. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I'm not the woman you think I am. That line would have been poetic if it hadn't been an accidental confession. Because she was right. She wasn't the woman I thought I was married to. She was someone else entirely. And I met the someone else 3 days later when the next shoe dropped. I picked Mia up from school again. Same pickup line, same honking chaos. This time, the front office called me in. The receptionist smiled like she was being polite through discomfort. The vice principal, a man named Mr. Heller, invited me into his office. He spoke carefully. Mr. Mercer, we received a request from Mrs. Mercer to update custody and contact instructions. My stomach tightened. What kind of request? He slid a form across the desk. It was a safety plan request, the kind used when a parent claims the other parent is a risk. It listed me as someone who should not pick Mia up without advance notice. It requested that the school call Lee if I appeared agitated. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at Mr. Heller and said, "We have no court order restricting me." He nodded quickly. "We understand. We haven't implemented anything. We wanted clarification." I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and forwarded the temporary custody filing confirmation from Elliot. Here, I said, legal is in motion. There is no safety concern, and this request is retaliatory. Mr. Heller read it, then looked up. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We see this sometimes. It can get messy. Not if people stick to facts," I said. He exhaled. "Do you want us to document that she submitted this request?" "Yes," I said. "Please, that was brand new territory for me. I'd never had to ask a school to document my wife, trying to paint me as a threat." I walked out of that office with Mia's backpack in my hand, and a new understanding in my chest. Lee wasn't just leaving. She was trying to win, and she was willing to burn my reputation to do it. So Elliot escalated. He filed for a temporary financial restraining order, standard in divorce. But he pushed for urgency due to the new credit accounts and transfers. He requested a court-ordered custody schedule immediately. He advised me to stop speaking with Lee directly, except in writing. Lee, of course, did the opposite. She started posting online, not explicitly about me, not at first, but vague posts about escaping emotional oppression and choosing safety for my children. Her comments filled with hearts from women I didn't know, women I'd never met, cheering for a version of Lee who apparently lived in a movie where she was always the hero. And then I found out just how far her double life went. Remember Riverside Flats? 2 days after that first phone call from Cal, I drove to the address I'd found on the credit report. I didn't go in like a lunatic. I didn't bang on doors. I sat in my car across the street and watched. After 20 minutes, I saw Lee's car turn in like it belonged there. She parked in a reserved spot, walked to the building, typed a code, went inside, like she'd done it 100 times. I sat there in the rain, hands on the wheel, and felt the bizarre sensation of watching my wife go home to a home she didn't tell me existed. I texted Elliot. She has an apartment. I'm confirming, he replied. Do not confront. Document, so I did. I took a photo of her car in the reserved spot, another of the building sign, another of the unit directory, showing a name I recognized. Not Lee Mercer, Leah Hart. She'd leased it under that name. My wife had been practicing, being someone else so long she'd become her. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the only one surprised. I reached out to Cal, not with anger, with facts. I sent a single text to the number that called me. This is Graham Mercer. Lee is my legal wife. We are in active divorce proceedings as of this week. If you have information you want to share before you get dragged into this, I'm available. He replied 10 minutes later. I didn't know. She told me you were basically done. She said you were scary. There it was again. Scary, the word people use when they want to make you defend something you never did. I asked if he could meet. We met at a coffee shop near the waterfront. Neutral territory. Public. Come. Cal was in his mid-30s. The kind of guy who dressed like he worked in creative events, which he did. He looked tired, not evil. He sat down and said, I swear I didn't know. She told me she was separated for months. How did you meet? I asked. He hesitated. She runs a support group. I blinked. A support group, he nodded, for women leaving controlling relationships. I got involved because my sister went through something, and I volunteered to help with event logistics. Lee was the face, charismatic, always composed, a support group. Lee, who had never once mentioned this in our house. Cal continued, voice low. She goes by Hart there. She told everyone it was safer not to use her real name. She said you were unpredictable. I sipped my coffee slowly, like I wasn't hearing my marriage turn into a public performance. What else did she say about me? He looked uncomfortable. That you tracked her, that you controlled money, that you scared the kids. My jaw tightened. Did you ever come to our house? I asked. No, he said quickly. She said that would be dangerous. She said you had cameras. I almost laughed. Because I didn't have cameras. Lee had simply told people I did, because it made her story better. Cal pulled out his phone. I have messages, he said, and emails, and flyers. He slid his phone toward me. The flyer was for an upcoming fundraiser event, featuring Leah Hart, a keynote speaker, topic rebuilding after narcissistic control. I stared at it, and something in me went very still. Because once your wife is selling a public story about you being an abuser, you're not just divorcing. You're defending your name in a way that can affect your kids, your work, your whole future. Cal watched me and said quietly, I'm sorry. I nodded once. So am I, then he added, almost like he couldn't help it. There's more. I looked up. He swallowed. She's not just doing this group. She's dating someone else too. My stomach dropped again. I thought that was me, he said, voice bitter. But there's another guy. She called him the real plan. The real plan, I repeated. Cal nodded. I saw a message pop up once. Name was Vince. Vince. Not a friend. Not someone I knew. A new character. A new life. Elliot filed an emergency motion within 48 hours. Not because Lee cheated. Courts don't care as much as people think. Because Lee was moving money, opening credit, creating a false safety narrative, and actively trying to restrict my access to my daughter through her school. That combination gets a judge's attention. Lee responded by doing what people do when they've been caught. She went louder. She filed for an emergency protective order, claimed I'd been threatening, claimed I'd cornered her, claimed she feared escalation. Elliot and I showed up to the hearing with printouts, timestamps, and a letter from the vice principal documenting Lee's attempted safety plan request with no court order. Lee showed up with Marisol and Kendra sitting behind her like they were there to watch a verdict on reality. The judge was a woman named Judge Elena Sato. Mid-50s, calm voice, not interested in theater. Lee told her story with tears that looked practiced. Elliot didn't attack her. He didn't call her names. He didn't raise his voice. He just laid out the timeline. Credit accounts, transfers, apartment lease under a different name, school safety plan request, public fundraiser under a false identity, painting me as dangerous. Then he handed the judge screenshots from Cal, carefully redacted for relevance, showing Lee describing me as unpredictable, while also asking him to help set up an event while living in my house. Judge Sato listened, expression neutral. Then she looked at Lee and said, Mrs. Mercer, you want an emergency order against a man you still share a home with, while you maintain a separate residence under an alternate name. Lee's mouth opened and closed. Judge Sato continued, you understand the court treats false emergency filings very seriously. Lee glanced back at Marisol like she wanted a script. Judge Sato denied the protective order. Then she granted temporary orders. Shared custody schedule, no removal of the children from the county, and a temporary restraint on moving or hiding marital assets. Not a total freeze, but a leash. Lee walked out of that courtroom pale, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with humiliation. And that's when the real war started. That week, Noah told me something that made my blood run cold. He said Lee had asked Mia to keep secrets. Not about me, about Lee. She told Mia not to tell you when she stays at the apartment, Noah said. She told her it's private and that you'd try to stop her. I sat at the kitchen table, hands flat, trying to keep my voice steady. Mia has been there? Noah nodded. Once, Mom picked her up early and said it was a girls' reset day. She posted pictures from a park, but Mia said they also went to a building, and Mom said, "This is our new safe place." Safe place. From me. I called Mia into my office that night. I didn't interrogate. I didn't scare her. I didn't make her choose. I just said, "Hey, I need to ask you something, and you're not in trouble." Mia sat on the chair, swinging her feet. Okay, has Mom taken you to another place? Like an apartment? Her face tightened. She hesitated. Then she whispered, "She said not to tell." I nodded slowly. I know, but I need you to hear me clearly. You don't keep secrets from Dad. Surprises are fine. Secrets are... Mia's eyes got glossy. She said you'd get mad and take me away from her. My chest tightened. I leaned forward. Listen to me. I will never take you away from your mom. The court decides schedules, not me. And I'm not mad at you. I'm worried about adults putting you in adult situations. Mia sniffed. She said you don't want her to be happy. I paused, then said softly, I want her to be honest. That line mattered. Because it was true. Lee didn't want happiness. She wanted control without consequences. A few days later, I found the storage unit. Not by breaking into anything, by doing something boring and effective. Lee left her key ring on the counter. There was a small brass key with a tag number. I snapped a photo of it and sent it to Elliot. He didn't tell me to go to the unit. He told me to subpoena the records. So we did. The records came back with Leah Hart listed as the renter. Elliot got a court order to inventory marital property. And that's how I ended up standing inside a storage unit that smelled like dust and perfume, staring at proof that my wife had been building a second life like she was packing for a move. There were bins of clothes I'd never seen, shoes still in boxes, a ring light and a tripod, stacks of printed flyers for the support fundraiser, a binder labeled Heart Legal, and inside that binder, draft statements, not about her healing, about me, per-written narratives she could hand to friends, coworkers, anyone who'd listen. Lines like, he monitored my spending. Lines like, he isolated me from community. Lines like, he used the kids as leverage. I stood there holding that binder and felt the kind of anger that doesn't burn hot. It burns cold, because it wasn't messy emotion. It was a plan. I handed everything to Elliot. He filed amendments. He notified the court that Lee was running public events under an alternate identity and financially benefiting from a story that implicated me. Lee responded by accusing me of stalking. Because when you get caught, you accuse. Judge Sato didn't appreciate it. At the next hearing, she looked at Lee and said, Mrs. Mercer, your alternate identity and public allegations are now relevant because they impact the children and the integrity of your filings. Lee's attorney tried to argue it was a safety practice. Judge Sato raised an eyebrow. A safety practice that includes fundraisers and dating. Silence. Temporary primary residential custody shifted to me pending full evaluation. Lee got scheduled visitation and required co-parenting communication through a monitored app. Marisol and Kendra stopped smiling after that. Tori disappeared entirely, which was honestly impressive considering how often she posts. Lee tried to appeal socially. She told people I was weaponizing the court. She told people I was punishing her for growth. But something happened that she didn't predict. The more she spoke, the more people noticed the inconsistencies. Because in real life, you can't be both terrified to use your real name and confident enough to headline a fundraiser with it printed on banners. You can't be too scared to tell your husband you have an apartment while telling strangers you're liberated. And you definitely can't claim you fear a man while asking your teenage son to document him like he's a suspect. Noah, without being asked, wrote a statement for Elliot. Not hateful, just honest. He wrote that Lee asked him to spy. He wrote that she told him to look for evidence of my instability. He wrote that he felt used. When Elliot showed me Noah's statement, I sat in my office and had to stare out the window for a full minute just to breathe. Because I was proud of him and heartbroken that he had to be brave like that at 16. The final stretch lasted months. Evaluations, financial discovery, depositions. Lee tried one more time to paint me as unsafe. It fell apart under scrutiny. Her own messages contradicted her story. Her alternate name contradicted her claim of transparency. Her storage unit contradicted her claim of being trapped. And Cal, bless him, submitted his own affidavit, not out of loyalty to me, but out of disgust at being lied to. He stated clearly that Lee told him she was separated, that she used the last name Hart, that she ran events centered on portraying me as controlling, and that she also referenced another man, Vince, as part of her future plan. That was the double life in black and white. Lee wasn't just cheating, she was auditioning for a new identity, building a support system around a manufactured story, and recruiting people, kids included, to play supporting roles. The day Judge Sato issued the final orders, the courtroom wasn't loud. No big outburst, no dramatic collapse, just the sound of paper and the quiet weight of consequences. Primary custody to me. Lee got structured visitation, with clear boundaries. Asset division favored me due to dissipation. Money moved, accounts opened, expenses tied to her alternate residence and public events. And because Lee's fundraiser finances were questionable, the judge ordered disclosure of related accounts and flagged it for further review. Legal escalation doesn't always mean handcuffs. Sometimes it means a judge calmly setting your fantasy down on the table and asking you to explain it under oath. Outside the courthouse, Lee stood near the steps, eyes red, face tight. She looked at me like I'd done this to her. She said, "Are you happy now?" I didn't gloat. I didn't give her a speech. I just said, "I'm peaceful," she scoffed. "You always have to win." I looked at her, really looked, and realized something. She genuinely believed that if she wasn't in control, she was losing. And that belief had cost her everything. "I didn't win, Lee," I said. "I protected the kids. That's not a victory. That's a responsibility." Her eyes flickered, like part of her wanted to argue and part of her couldn't. Then she turned and walked away. Noah and Mia were waiting with my sister in the parking lot. Mia ran to me first, wrapping her arms around my waist like she was trying to anchor herself. Noah followed slower, but he nodded once. A small adult nod. As we drove home, the car was quiet. Not the tense quiet of secrets. A different quiet, the kind that feels like exhaling after holding your breath too long. That night, Noah asked if we could order pizza and watch something dumb. Mia wanted extra cheese. I said yes to both, because rebuilding isn't always a big revelation. Sometimes it's sitting on your couch with your kids, eating pizza, and realizing the air in your house feels lighter without someone constantly rewriting reality. Lee stayed Lee, in the sense that she didn't suddenly become accountable. She tried to maintain the Hart persona for a while, but without the thrill of secrecy and the leverage of my silence, it didn't sparkle the same. People drifted, fundraisers became awkward, stories got inconsistent, and the thing about a double life is that it requires constant energy to maintain. Eventually, it collapses under its own weight. My life didn't become perfect. I still had to co-parent. I still had to navigate the weirdness of my children, loving someone who had hurt them. I still had nights where grief showed up uninvited. But my self-respect came back like a muscle. You don't realize you've been starving. And here's the lesson I walked away with. The one I wish I'd learned earlier. A relationship can survive hard seasons. It can survive conflict, exhaustion, even resentment, if both people are honest. But it can't survive a person who treats truth like a tool. Because once someone starts building a story where you're the villain, you can spend your life trying to prove you're not. Or you can step out of the script entirely. Lee tried to trap me with agreements and witnesses and narratives. She tried to win by making me look like someone I was. But the moment she asked our children to help her lie, she crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And I didn't respond with rage. I responded with calm, legal reality. I used the system the way it was designed. To protect kids, to preserve assets, to hold facts over feelings when feelings become weapons. The funniest part, if you can call it funny, is that Lee kept telling people I was controlling. But the only thing I controlled was my own dignity. I didn't chase her. I didn't beg. I didn't bargain for the version of her that used to exist. I accepted what was in front of me and made decisions like a father, not a desperate husband. And if you're listening to this because you recognize pieces of your own life in it, if you're living with someone who's rewriting reality and calling it growth, hear me when I say this. Self-respect is not stubbornness. Boundaries are not cruelty. And staying calm doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes calm is the sharpest thing you can be. Because calm is what lets you see the truth clearly. And once you see it, you don't have to keep participating in a life that only makes sense for the person who's lying.